The internet is an extremely convenient tool for learning new things. It has a simple user interface. Type what you want to learn about, and click on any resulting links. It makes quenching curiosity as easy as that. God knows how many debates I've ended between my parents when I've turned to Google. However, the internet is a double-edged sword. Because of the various websites that the internet supports, a person can learn a single piece of information in a variety of ways. As I've come to understand, there are 3 general schools of thought for how one does online learning. They are vegging out learning, evidence learning, and skill learning. Let's briefly look at these schools of thought and see how one should approach them responsibly. Vegging out learning is perhaps one of the original poster child purposes of the public internet. If you have a simple random question on your mind, you can go to the internet to search it up. Like mentioned earlier, I do this frequently to end my parents' short debates when I turn to Google. These questions are typically ones with short, concrete answers that are often quantifiable in some way. A defining point of vegging out learning is that it's a sort of entertainment. We take a kind of pleasure and/or amusement from learning new things from wandering around online. However, as fun and as relaxing as this form of learning can be, one must be careful when planning to use information they've learned from this style of learning in future endeavors, especially if one didn't take too much time to check if the information was correct. Evidence learning is the second school of thought for online learning. For anyone who's had to take high school English classes, you know what this is. It's what you do when you're looking for sources to use for your English research paper. Typically, these sources are used as evidence for when you're building arguments, hence the name. Such sources often include informational websites, online articles, or electronic journal issues. While evidence learning requires a person to put more effort into their research than vegging out learning, it is still vulnerable to similar weaknesses. The first vulnerability is not checking the credibility of the source. If the source is a promotional website for some sort of product, then there might be some bias on the company's side about its claims on the product. Additionally, it's important for one to check the domain of the source. Typically, domains like .com are not as reliable as public official sources with domains like .edu, .gov, or .org, though this is not a strict rule. The second weakness is much more dangerous: cherry picking. Sometimes information from a source one wants to use does not exactly fit their expectations. This may result in that person unconsciously, or worse, consciously, ignoring that source and search for better sources that better fit their expectations. The key to overcoming these vulnerabilities is to consider where the information comes from and to consider whether your biases affected what you looked at. The final school of thought is skill learning. Unlike the other schools of thought, this one is much more start-end oriented. Typically, when you're doing this kind of learning, you do it to accomplish a physical something. These somethings can be anything, like how to pay your taxes, how to bake an expensive looking cake, or how to get to your grandmother's house. The key word that you'll hear or think to yourself when doing this kind of learning is the word how. This form of online learning makes typically difficult tasks more accessible to the public. And with the internet, people can publish their own online do-it-yourself instructions for billions of people worldwide to see. Websites that are built for this sort of task are websites like Instructables, GitHub, and WikiHow. However, just as is the case with other schools of thought, the credibility of the source also matters. What one must understand is that much of what they see on the internet might not be the official instructions for how to do a particular task, and failure to do so might lead to them accidentally inflicting harm on them, depending on the task they wish to accomplish. No, Timmy, you are not building a time machine from a toaster. I don't care if Creeper67 online says you can do it. You're not doing it. I just said a lot of words, so let's zoom out a bit. As we've just explored, it's important to consider how you are learning information online because the method determines how you're using that information. Let's take a brief look at some easy ways to determine how you're researching online. If you are looking up a question with a quantifiable or short answer, and/or you have no future use for the information, then you're probably vegging out learning. However, If you are using or citing images, text, or quotes from your sources, you're probably evidence learning. And finally, if you are looking up questions or instructions that include the phrase how to, then you're probably skill learning. Every kind of online learning has its strengths and weaknesses, and hopefully this analysis will let you learn smarter while surfing the net.